If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 7 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. This time-stamped email proves that this prediction that Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025 has been known since November 9th. We can see here the timestamp November 9th, 2024. On November 8th, 2024, we received the relevant prophetic signs related to Paul Simon. And as I wrote right here, God was pointing to November 8th ahead of time because Simon's death will point to Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. And this is the reason why Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. In short, the date 8:1 and 11:8 hint at Revelation 8:1 in the Bible, which describes a period of silence that was observed in heaven. Paul Simon's first hit was Sound of Silence. As I wrote right here, it is exactly 38 weeks between November 8th and August 1st, 2025, and Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, for which 38 weeks hints at. A dirty bomb is a conventional explosive that uses radioactive material. I am predicting that 3 dirty bombs will explode in New York City, in Times Square, Penn Station, and Grand Central Station. There will then be a massive evacuation from Manhattan Island. I am predicting that these 3 dirty bombs will explode on either August 30th or September 4th. I am also predicting that a dirty bomb will explode in the port of Los Angeles on September 4th. I am predicting that Tehran, Iran, will be nuked by the US or possibly Israel on September 7th, 2025. This will obviously be in response to the dirty bombs that are predicted to explode in New York City. I am predicting that Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom will die in a plane crash in St. Louis as they are traveling from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles in Busch Stadium in St. Louis on August 2nd, 2028. This will be during the predicted presidential campaign of Gavin Newsom. As a result of Gavin Newsom's death, Michelle Obama will become the Democrat Party's presidential nomination. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. Donald Trump is predicted to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. This scheme to overcome the 22nd Amendment will backfire and inspire Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to run on the ticket with Barack Obama as Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down and Barack Obama will become the president again. It is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, Brazil on April 24th, 2029. It is now recognized that there will be 2 massive Mary apparitions on the beach in Rio. The first of the 2 is predicted to be on March 22nd, 2029. These predicted Mary apparitions will not be secretive. They will be mainstream, worldwide news. Like all Mary apparitions in history, including at Lourdes, Guadalupe, and Fatima, this Mary apparition will be a demon pretending to be Mary. It is predicted that on April 26th, 2029, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the fifth trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. It is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected from the grave on April 26th, 2029. And it is possible that on this day, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. The resurrection rapture event will occur on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. On September 11th, 2029, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the East Coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. As we can see here, this email that is making this prediction was composed on July 9th, 2025. Okay, July 9th. And also, the date that this video is posted proves as well that this prediction is being made ahead of time. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward this to you. Now, just briefly, to the agnostic atheist skeptic that will say to themselves that I must have made a video predicting the death of Paul Simon for every day of the calendar year, and that in the hopes that eventually I would get lucky and get it correct. That's ludicrous. And the reason for this is two reasons. One, only a crazy person would do such a thing. And to think that someone would do that makes that person who's thinking that the crazy person. Okay? And two, also, the reasons or reasoning for how this prediction is known ahead of time, which will be mentioned in this video and in other videos, is profound and clear, and no human mind is creative enough to come up with these reasons, this reasoning, on their own. It's clearly from God, as you will see. It's clearly supernatural. No one is creative enough. I've got tons of reasons for how August 1st is known. First and foremost, as I'll explain in this paragraph, the date 8:1 hints at Revelation 8:1 in the Bible, in which there is a period of silence that's described, and Paul Simon's first biggest hit was Sound of Silence. That's why Paul Simon will die on the date 8:1. Now, I have also known that Paul Simon will die on 8/1, 2025, since November of 2024. I didn't get around to documenting this with videos and an email until July, however. I was busy with other things. But July 9th is enough of a prediction anyway. Should have made at least an email. Well, you know what? I'm sure there is emails, just not a formal one. I'm sure I wrote emails to friends back in November of 2018. I know I did. Maybe I should go back and get one of those and put it into a video. Well, anyway, this video will be broken up. As you can see, there are multiple paragraphs, and I'll be breaking it up into multiple videos, as well as putting it into one whole video. So watch all of the videos. The wise person will recognize when the prediction comes to pass that they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. Obviously, right? If this prediction comes to pass, this is from God, and it would be a fool to not watch, that wouldn't watch every minute of every video on this channel. I mean, what are you thinking? Okay, now, this email is documenting the prediction that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. Paul Simon's first hit, which topped the Billboard chart, was Sound of Silence, which incidentally, Paul Simon has said in interviews that there were a few of his songs, this being one of them, that he didn't really write, and that he was more of a conduit where the song just flowed through him. In other words, he's speaking of something supernatural as to the authorship of some of his songs. And anyway, Revelation 8:1 describes how silence was observed, as in Sound of Silence, in heaven for about a half an hour. This is why Paul Simon will die on the date 8/1. It will hint at Revelation 8:1. Following the observed silence in heaven in Revelation 8:1 is the description of the 7 trumpets of God's judgment and the destruction on earth. Okay, so following this sound of silence in heaven, Paul Simon, we have in this chapter 7 trumpets of God's judgment and destruction on earth. Simon says he was instructed in a prophetic dream to produce his most recent album and to name it 7 Psalms. So a voice instructed him to name the album 7 Psalms and to make this album. 7 Psalms, okay, 7 trumpets. Simon had a big hit late in the evening, which is known for its heavy use of trumpets. The sound of silence in heaven for a half an hour was a warning that preceded the 7 trumpets of judgment and destruction. Okay? That's the beginning. It's essentially a warning. This period of silence that's then followed with lightning and thunder and earthquakes in heaven, and then the 7 trumpet judgments. Okay, so it's a warning. It's a warning of the 7 trumpet judgments. What's about to happen. That's what a warning does. It comes before the bad thing that's about to happen. Paul Simon had a hit song named America, and another one named American Tune. The song Late in the Evening alludes to how the timing is late before the commencement of God's judgment and destruction on America. In Bible prophecy, following the 7 trumpets of judgment and destruction is a description of the body. So just to summarize there. Paul Simon's death, in other words, on the date 8/1, will be a warning of destruction on America. That it's late in the evening. The 7 trumpets are about to begin. God's judgment is commensurate with the amount of light and blessings the individual or nation received. America is God's Gentile nation. The judgment and destruction is primarily focused on America. Some people ask me sometimes, well, why are you always so focused on America with God's prophetic signs? And the answer is, because God is. God's prophetic signs are about America. God's focused on America. God chose and used America for this purpose as a demonstration, just like he used ancient Israel. Same thing. That's why God chose the Jews and the nation of Israel to demonstrate to the rest of the world. He doesn't scatter his law and teachings around the whole world all at once. He used the nation of Israel, likewise America. He's not scattering his prophetic signs around the world. He's focused on his nation, his prized, precious Gentile nation that was a nation of disciples of Christ at its founding with the Pilgrims and Puritans. Now, so in Bible prophecy, following the 7 trumpets of judgment and destruction is a description of the bottom. And by the way, there are only 2 nations in the history of the world that were founded on a relationship with God and the Bible, Israel and America. In Bible prophecy, because the nation of America was founded by the Puritans and the Pilgrims, who saw their crossing of the Atlantic to the New World as analogous to the Israelites' crossing of the Red Sea and the Jordan River into the Promised Land, after they escaped persecution from the King of Egypt, like the Pilgrims were escaping persecution from the King of England. In Bible prophecy, following the 7 trumpets of judgment and destruction is a description of the bottomless pit that is opened with a key. Simon is not only known for singing, but for his songwriting, and the musical key is important in music compositions. The word key is equal to 41 in simple English gematria, and 41 is the 13th prime number. Simon was born on the 13th day of the month in 41. Simon's biggest hit was Bridge Over Troubled Water, and demons will cross a metaphorical bridge from the demonic realm into the earthly realm, and the opening of the bottomless pit. And again, this follows the 7 trumpet judgments, the opening of the bottomless pit with a key, after which the demons will cross a bridge into the earthly realm. The word bridge, as in Bridge Over Troubled Water, which is Simon's biggest hit, which was another of his songs that he said he didn't really write. The word bridge is equal to 45 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. The album containing the song Late in the Evening was released exactly 4,500.00% of a calendar year before Simon's predicted death. And his death will signify that it is late in the evening before God's judgment and destruction, primarily on America. Simon's biggest hit was Bridge Over Troubled Water. God is using the metaphor of a bridge or a door to symbolize the opening of the bottomless pit to demons that is described in the book of Revelation. By the way, it's Revelation chapter 9, and 45 is the 9th triangular number. And so bridge is equal to 45 in simple English gematria, as I was saying, and this exact 4,500.00% of a year from the release of the album containing Late in the Evening to Simon's predicted death is all part of this Revelation 9 prophecy, because 45 is the 9th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 9th row is 45. Also, 45 is a multiple of 9, and 4 plus 5 equals 9. And 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. As from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. So Simon's biggest hit, A Bridge Over Troubled Water, which he says he didn't really write and was more of a conduit as the song flowed through him, which implies supernatural. God is using the metaphor of a bridge or a door to symbolize the opening of the bottomless pit to demons that are described in the book of Revelation chapter 9, as I just mentioned. And again, Paul Simon's death will point to Revelation chapter 8 and the sound of silence in heaven, which precedes the 7 trumpets, and then those 7 trumpets precede the opening of the bottomless pit. The number 4 symbolizes a door, as the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a symbol for a door. Hebrew letters are also symbols for things. The etymological root of the word door in English is the word dalat, which is the word for the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Dalat is where we get delta also, which is where we get door. The word door is derived from the Hebrew word for the 4th letter, dalat, as I was just saying. 8/1/25, Simon's predicted date of death, will be exactly 4 times 4 months. And by the way, this is the first day of the 4 plus 4th month, but it will be exactly 4 times 4 months after Paul Simon performed at the White House for a state dinner for the Prime Minister of Japan on April 1st, 2024. God is using Japan as symbolism for a door to the demonic realm, as Japan is known for anime, which is obsessed with spiritual possession. The demons that will come from the bottomless pit through the door that is opened with a key. As I mentioned, Paul Simon is associated with musical keys, and as I mentioned in the last paragraph. Okay, and these demons that will cross over into the earthly realm will demonically possess people, as alluded to in Revelation chapter 9. God is using Japan in his signs for 3 symbolic reasons. One of them is Japan animation, anime, which is obsessed with spiritual possession. And by the way, all of the cute little characters that are nonsensical, etc., in Japanese culture, which are ubiquitous in the culture, are symbolism for demons. It's rooted in the Japanese ancient religion of animism, worshiping the animals, etc. And that's why the modern culture has this, I guess, attraction to all of these nonsensical characters, which are in truth demons. There's a heavy demonic spirit over the nation of Japan, as well as many other nations, but it's a different form of the demonic spirit. It's not like the demonic spirit over Iran or China. It's different, but it's manifested in the cutesy culture of the Japan anime, which is obsessed with illicit sex and also spiritual possession. It's all demonic. Now, Simon sang his song Graceland at the White House mansion, and Graceland is about traveling to the Graceland mansion in the 4 times 4th state. And again, Simon sang about the mansion in the 4 times 4th state exactly 4 times 4 months before his predicted death, as I say in the next sentence. Okay. Yeah, Simon is predicted to die exactly 4 times 4 months after he sang for the president in the White House mansion about Graceland mansion in the 4 times 4th state. And the 4 times, and by the way, the White House mansion has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, and the 44th president is predicted to return to the White House mansion as the Antichrist. That's what all of this, that's the reason for this connection. God pointed to the White House mansion, 4 times with Paul Simon, 4 times 4 months before Simon's death, exactly, and that's because of the 44th president returning to the mansion as the Antichrist. The day that Simon sang about the Graceland mansion, which is in the 4 times 4th state, also, don't forget. And the Graceland mansion is in the area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt, because the king of rock and roll's mansion is symbolic of the king of Egypt's palace in the Bible. Okay, the day that he sang about the Graceland mansion in the Little Egypt was the 4th, and by the way, Elvis has a song named Little Egypt, was the 4th prime number of days before the path of totality of the eclipse over America passed over Little Egypt, including Cairo, Illinois. This eclipse first entered the U.S. over Eagle Pass in Texas at the border, which hinted at Paul Simon's song, El Condor Pasa. It's astounding. And El Condor Pasa was the 4th released song from the Bridge Over Troubled Water album. And again, bridge is synonymous with door in God's signs, and door is the symbolic of 4. So El Condor Pasa was the 4th song. This eclipse that went over Little Egypt, that pointed to the mansion in the 4 times 4th state, first entered the U.S. over Eagle Pass. And then after the eclipse went over Eagle Pass, it passed over Simon's mansion in Wimberley, Texas, where Simon lives today. Amazing. Paul Simon is Jewish. On the day that Simon sang at the White House, the mansion in the 4 times 4th state, 4 times 4 months before his predicted death, for the Japanese prime minister, the Israeli Defense Force accidentally bombed, and Japan is symbolic of nuclear bombs, the 4th prime number of workers for World Central Kitchen. You may recall this was the big news story of the day. There was this NGO, charity group, if you will, providing food to the Gazans. The name of the organization, World Central Kitchen. It's part of this prophetic sign, is part of these signs, part of signs that are pointing to the coming food shortage, the worldwide food shortage, after the volcano in the 4 times 4th state on the 44th latitude line erupts, Yellowstone. That will put ash into the atmosphere, which will cause crop crisis, failures, and a food shortage. And anyway, that's what was pointed to here. But also, it was 7 that died, and it was 7 days after. No, it was the same day, but 7 days before the eclipse. But it was the same day that Paul Simon, who was Jewish, sang for the Japanese prime minister at the White House. But again, the 7 deaths, because 7 is the 4th prime number. And Simon is equal to bridge, which is equal to door, which is equal to 4, as I've been explaining. And again, that day is 4 times 4 months before Simon's predicted death. Okay. So yeah, on the day that Simon died, 4th prime number of people died in the prophetic sign, 4 times 4 months before Simon's predicted death. Okay, now, this was on April 1st, 2024. By the way, the first day of the 4th month. And that day was 4,444% of a calendar year after the first day of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis. The Iran hostage crisis is also known as the 444-day hostage crisis. which coincided with Jimmy Carter's final 444 days in the White House mansion. Simon performed for Carter's pre-inaugural ball before he went to the mansion, the day before Carter moved into the White House mansion. And so in this way, Simon is associated with Jimmy Carter's presidency. And in the inaugural ball, Simon performed his song, American Tune, for Jimmy Carter. Carter was inaugurated in 1977. Simon performed for it. Carter's presidency began a series of 7 presidents that parallel the 7 kings prophecy in the Bible, but that's another story. And Simon's recent album, again, is 7 Psalms, and there are 7 trumpets that follow the sound of silence in heaven. And Simon has a song, Late in the Evening, known for its use of trumpets. Simon sang Graceland about the Graceland mansion in the White House mansion, which has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, and God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. He sang about the Graceland mansion in the White House mansion on the first day of the 4th month of the year in the year 24, which is 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. It's another repetition of 44, if you will, 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And this day, the first day of the 4th month in this year, was 4,444% of a calendar year after the first day of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis. The Iran hostage crisis is also known as the 444-day hostage crisis. The first lyric, and it coincided incidentally with the final 444 days of Jimmy Carter in the White House mansion. The first lyrics, as you can see here, God uses firsts for signs. The first lyrics of the song Graceland is, quote, "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar," unquote. This is, if you will, like an incipit. An incipit is a term used for the first phrase or sentence or idea of a piece of literature or music, right? Because back in the day, a couple of centuries ago, there was no such thing as titles. Giving a piece a title was an invention, a new thing at some point in history, not too long ago. And so pieces were known by their first sentence. That's how pieces were referenced. It's called an incipit. Anyway, if you will, the incipit of the song Graceland is, "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar." By the way, the most famous incipit in history is, "It was a dark and stormy night." You know, you've heard that before. That's the first line of a famous piece of work. Okay, now, so the first words of the song are the Mississippi Delta. The name Mississippi is unusual in that it contains 4 instances of the letter S and 4 instances of the letter I. This is more of this number 4 theme. Okay, again, Paul Simon sang this in the mansion, the White House mansion, that is 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms on the first day of the 4th month, 4,444% of the year after the first day of the 444-day hostage crisis. And this Mississippi is also hinting at that because, again, we've got 2 instances of 4 instances of a letter in this name, Mississippi, which is highly unusual. In other words, or rather, additionally, the name Mississippi is known for this. It's known for having this repetition of two of its letters 4 times. What other word can you think of or name that has such a thing? I can't think of one. And so God, in other words, designed it that this state be named Mississippi from its very beginning, with its repetition of 4 times repetition of 2 different letters, for this purpose of this prophetic sign that I'm explaining right now. That's correct. It's true what I've just said. Think about that. The name Mississippi is for the purpose of what I'm explaining right now. Because everything comes together at the end. It's all in service of God's plan. And God's plan is his big picture of signs that I'm explaining. His big picture of signs is about the big plan. And it all comes together in the end. For what purpose? For this purpose of this prediction. Why the purpose of the prediction? To prove to you the things that I am saying. To prove to you the warning. The warning of what is coming. That's the reason why the name Mississippi was named Mississippi from the very beginning. Hopefully I've made that clear. So, the name Mississippi, I just read that. So it has 4 instances of the letter S and 4 instances of the letter I. The letter S is the 19th letter, and the letter I is the 9th letter. And by the way, the number 9 is the most important number in God's prophetic signs. It's from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. Now, 19 is the 4 plus 4th semi-prime number. That's more 4s for you. (19 plus 9 is equal to 7 times 4, which is the 4th prime number times 4. 7 times 4 in itself hints at the date 7-4, which is symbolic of America, which is symbolic of Simon, because Simon has a big hit named America, as well as American Tune. Simon really is symbolic of America. He is the baby boomer generation singer-songwriter, and he is a cultural folk type of singer-songwriter. He really does symbolize America. It's perfect that God uses Paul Simon for his big picture here. Wow, has he ever used Paul Simon. So anyway, we have in this Mississippi Delta first lyric of the famous song Graceland, we have the hint at the number 4. And again, Paul Simon is symbolic of 4 because of the bridge and door symbolism. Because bridge over troubled water, Simon's biggest song, is hinting at bridge, which is this metaphor God is using in his signs, the same symbol as the meaning of door. And the door is the 4th letter of the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. Hebrew letters are also symbols for things, and the 4th letter is also symbolic of a door. Okay, so we also have the number 4 embedded in the letter S and 9 because they add up to something that gives us the 4th prime number times the number 4. Now, delta is the 4th letter of the Greek alphabet. The Greek delta letter, the 4th letter, its origin is in the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Dalat. The name delta, or the word delta, comes from Dalat. Incidentally, the word door comes from delta. The etymological origin of the word door is actually rooted in the Hebrew symbol for door, Dalat. Okay? Which is the 4th letter. Now, in other words, the Mississippi Delta hints at the number 4. Simon's current concert tour began at the Pro-Delta part of the Mississippi Delta in New Orleans on the date 4/4. If you're wondering what the Pro-Delta is, it's where the river meets the ocean. It's the end of the delta, the bottom part, the last part of the delta region. Paul Simon sings about the Mississippi Delta, and the very end of that delta is New Orleans. And Paul Simon began his current tour in New Orleans in the Mississippi Delta at the end of the Mississippi Delta on the date 4/4. And Delta and Mississippi hint at 4, like I just explained. Now, incidentally, the name of the tour is Quiet Celebration, which hints at Sound of Silence, which is why Paul Simon will die on the date 8/1, because of Revelation 8:1 and the sound of silence that was observed in heaven. Now, the origin of the word delta comes from the word dalat, like I just explained, which is the name of the fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is the symbol for a door. The origin of the word door comes from dalat. This is why the number 4 is symbolic of a door. The White House mansion sits on 5 acres, and the Graceland mansion sits on the 5th semi-prime number of acres, which is 14. The semi-prime number is a number only divisible by 2 other prime numbers, and God uses semi-prime numbers in his signs. So, in the 2 mansions, the Graceland mansion that was sung about in the White House mansion, we have the number 5, because the White House mansion is on 5 acres and the Graceland mansion is on the 5th semi-prime number of acres. The Graceland mansion is connected to New Orleans and the Pro-Delta part of the Mississippi Delta by the Interstate 55. Following the lyric, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar, Simon describes traveling down this I-55 highway. He doesn't say it's the I-55, but it obviously is, because that's the highway that connects the Mississippi Delta to Memphis, where he is going in his song. Bridge Over Troubled Water was Simon and Garfunkel's 5th and last album. The 5th trumpet judgment is when demons rise from the bottomless pit and cross over a bridge and through the door to the earthly realm. That's why Bridge Over Troubled Water was Simon and Garfunkel's 5th and last album. It's because of the 5th trumpet and the bridge that the demons cross from the bottomless pit. These demons will demonically possess people through delta brain waves that will be facilitated by 5G frequencies. Music is frequencies. Bible prophecy says that those who will be demonically possessed will be tormented for 5 months and will seek death but will not be able to find it. All right? Which is why, by the way, there's a prophetic sign in which Paul Simon performed at a music festival at the Golden Gate Park, Outside Lands, which hints at the demonic realm, and during the concert spoke about his time in the 1960s when he was in San Francisco and knocked on the door to the residence of the Grateful Dead band members, as in the Grateful Dead, as in those who will be tormented for 5 months but won't be able to die, and so they're not gratefully dead. And then the member of the band came onto the stage and they performed together the first song from Simon and Garfunkel's 5th and last album. So the first song released. So anyway, what I want to elaborate on here is this delta brainwaves. This will be triggered by the 5G frequencies, which will engender, if you will, delta brainwaves within people's brains. And that will facilitate the demonic possession. I'm not an expert on the science, but there have been studies on this in, I guess, tribes in Africa, maybe South America, I forget, where they've, hooked the brains up to the EEGs, and while they've gone into trance states where they become basically possessed. And the delta brainwaves are what is the common denominator with these people that enter that state, which is interesting, given that God is also pointing to delta brainwaves as being the factor in the demonic possession. But that's why Paul Simon sang the Mississippi Delta is shining like a national guitar. Now, shining is God's playing on that with the movie The Shining, which is about paranormal and possession. The Stephen King, Jack Nicholson movie, right? And also Shelley Duvall, whom Paul Simon dated. In fact, Paul Simon broke up with Shelley Duvall at the airport, as in the portal to the demonic realm, before she left to film the movie, The Shining. So, and there's actually a photo with Paul Simon, Trump, God's trumpet, and Jack Nicholson at a boxing match. And Paul Simon's first song, I just realized this, Paul Simon's first song from the fifth album is The Boxer. Wow. Trump, fifth trumpet, right? Boxing, where they not only box, what do? They clobber each other's heads. This just came to me. Oh, wow. The reason for The Boxer and Paul Simon is the demonic possession of the brain, like I'm describing, through the delta brainwaves, which is the reason for the lyric, the Mississippi Delta, was shining. Oh, and that's the reason for the Beatles' transformative hit, which transformed, it was the first alternative rock hit. Tomorrow, what's the name of something Tomorrow. But the lyric that John Lennon keeps repeating, it is not dying, it is shining. That's a part of this, okay? That's in another video too. It just goes on, and God is so creative. He's the ultimate artist. And so, but that's part of this theme here of the shining, which is why the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. And it's music. Guitars produce music, which is frequencies. This is all hinting at the frequencies that will produce the shining, the demonic possession through the delta brainwaves. Wow. Again, Simon is predicted to die exactly 4 times 4 months after he sang at the White House mansion, which has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, on the first day of the 4th month, 4,444% of a year after the beginning of the first day of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis. He sang about the Graceland Mansion and the Mississippi Delta. Mississippi has 4 S's and 4 I's, and Delta is the 4th letter. S equals 19, I equals 9. Simon and Garfunkel's prophetic reunion concert in Central Park was on the date 9/19. That's what's hinted at, right? Because he was singing a concert in the White House for the state dinner for the Prime Minister of Japan. And he sang Mississippi in the White House. And Mississippi hints at 9 and 19, as I've explained. Well, the prophetic concert of history, if you will, is the Simon and Garfunkel reunion concert on the date 9/19 in 1981. 81, by the way, is incidentally 9 times 9, and 8 plus 1 equals 9. The number 9 is the most important number. As from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. And so that's a big reason for this date for this prophetic concert, which again involved so many of Paul Simon's signs that hint at judgment. like I just explained in another video, or this video if you watch all of it in one going, because I'll combine them all, about the sound of silence being parallel with the judgment in the book of Amos, chapter 8. It's stunning, stunning. Well, anyway, let's move on here. So the date of this concert was exactly 188 months. By the way, these connections here have been known since late 2023. So 188, because this is a number God uses frequently in his signs to hint at H188, the Hebrew word that means woe, exclamation mark, which is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. And the first of the three woes in the book of Revelation is the fifth trumpet judgment, which is part of the seven trumpets that follow the sound of silence in heaven in Revelation 8:1, which is why Simon will die on the date 8:1. Anyway, the date of the concert was exactly 188 months after the release of the famous Paul Simon Art Garfunkel song, Homeward Bound. Okay, this is an important song. The Homeward Bound is obviously a reference to God's faithful who are homeward bound, because this isn't their home. But also, this is a play on Paul Simon, who is homeward bound. I do believe that it is in God's plan that Paul Simon make it to heaven. I've watched him in interviews. It isn't Orthodox Christianity to say that, but what does that matter? Furthermore, Orthodox Christianity has only two categories of people for after they die, when there are in fact three. There's the category of people who had an opportunity and rejected God in this life, the incorrigible, the unrepentant, the unrighteous. There's the category of those who will pass from life to life. They will not go to Sheol. They will not go to hell. They're the ones who are in the process of being saved, because no one is saved until they get there. And then there's the third category of the middlings, the majority of people who didn't get a fair opportunity in this life, or even perhaps they lived before Christ. And they will be given a chance to repent in hell, in Sheol, in the holding place. And so they are the basically good people, but don't know Christ. No one is good, as Jesus said, but they aren't the incorrigibles. So you see what I'm saying? There's three categories, and there's ample proof of this in the Bible, where it's spoken of how Jesus will go and preach to those in hell. Peter wrote about this, for example. And so anyway, I don't know what category Paul Simon is in. He might even be in the category of passing from life to life. I'm not sure. If not, though, I'm pretty sure he will be in the second category. Perhaps he's in that category. It's not for me to say, though. Actually, everyone goes to an individual place. No one's going to the same place. It's all based on that person, right? A judgment is commensurate with that particular individual. And so where Simon goes, I'm confident he will ultimately end up with those that are with the Lord. Anyway, I say that based on his recent interviews that I've watched, I mean, he is clearly someone who believes in God and the God of a monotheistic God. Let's put it that way. He doesn't really divulge too much, but you can tell that this man is a spiritually minded person, I guess especially at his late age. Furthermore, you get these biblical themes, and also the recent album, Seven Psalms, is about crossing over in the bridge into the afterlife. That's the theme of the album. Speaking of which, that's what I'm getting at here. I'm getting at the Seven Psalms album. So let's get back to what I was saying here. Homeward Bound is connected to the prophetic concert with exactly 188 months. The fifth trumpet is a woe. That's what 188 means. Now, the concert, let's see, Paul Simon is Jewish, and the name Paul Simon is equal to 500 in Hebrew gematria. Paul Simon's only number one hit as a solo artist was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. The concert, the prophetic concert in Central Park, was attended by 500,000 people, and it occurred. There's other fives with Paul Simon, by the way. The fifth album is Bridge Over Troubled Water. And it occurred exactly 500 months before the release of Seven Psalms. Okay, Paul Simon is equal to 500. The concert attracted famously 500,000 people, and it occurred exactly 500 months before the release of Seven Psalms on May 19th, 2023. That date was 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days. And again, Paul Simon is equal to bridge, which equals to door, which equals to 4, after Simon's prophetic dream that instructed him to produce the album and name it Seven Psalms. Okay, and he talks about this dream in the interviews, and those that interview him in his residence in Texas, he shows them the piece of paper that he wrote on after the dream that's currently framed on his wall. And it has a date. The date of his dream was January 15th in 2019. And what I am getting at is the most stunning thing. One of the most amazing things that I have learned that's been revealed through God's big picture of signs. There's actually important, is not the right word, purpose for this date, January 15th. The album was released, and again, the release of the album on May 19th, 2023 connects to the Homeward Bound. The theme of the album is crossing over into the afterlife. The album was released, and the album was inspired on the date 115, and the album was released exactly 115 weeks before Simon is predicted to die on August 1st. So again, if you can picture this without a diagram, I should probably have one. The album was released again on the date 115, 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days. Sorry, the album was inspired by a dream on the date 115, 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days before the release of the album, which was released exactly 115 weeks before Simon's predicted death. And obviously the date 115, you now know, hints at 115. Or actually the other way around. 115 weeks hints at the date 115. As I will explain in the Wally Amos section of this email thread, this points to the first chapter of Amos, the book of Amos, the prophet Amos, which has 15 verses. All right, the date 115 hints at Amos 1 and its 15 verses. What's with this chapter, in other words? This is the first chapter of Amos. What's with this chapter? The phrase, quote, for 3 transgressions and for 4, unquote, is repeated in this chapter And its meaning is that it is a Hebrew idiom signifying a fullness or a completeness of sin, reaching a point where God's judgment is inevitable. It's not simply listing 4 transgressions, but rather using the 4 to emphasize that the sins have gone beyond a tolerable limit, reaching a quote-unquote tipping point. This is the most stunning revelation. Now we have it even more clear. So far in these videos and in this email thread, I've been talking about the relevance of the number 4 to Paul Simon because of bridge over troubled water, and bridge being the same symbolism as a door, and door equaling the number 4 because it being the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. But that was only half the story. This other most important thing possible, because of the number 4 here, this revelation has only come now. Only now have I been able to figure out, has it's been able to be figured out, the purpose for these 4s regarding Paul Simon. It's not only about the door. It's about the book of Amos and the tipping point and the 4 symbolizing that. Because the phrase is, again, for 3 transgressions and for 4. So if you know this chapter, God's listing the 3 transgressions of Gaza, the 3 transgressions of Tyre, the 3 transgressions of the Amorites or whatever, and it says for 3 transgressions and for 4. So what does this mean? It's an idiom in Hebrew, and it means the completeness of sin reaching a tipping point, because in the Hebrew in Hebrew ideas, 3 signifies completion. So the completeness of sin, and then it's followed by a 4, which makes this an idiom that's just hinting or meaning the going beyond the completeness of sin to where it's a beyond tolerable limit and a tipping point which requires unavoidable judgment and destruction. Incidentally, this 3 followed by 4, once I learned this, I figured out the reason for God using the number 34. It hints at this. That's why, for example, 2 planes struck the 2 towers 17 minutes apart on 9/11, when the Dow was 0.34 points above its previous close. And that's because 2 times 17, as in 2 planes that struck the 2 towers 17 minutes apart, is equal to 34. That hit the World Trade Centers, and the chapter in the Bible that signifies judgment on the world is Isaiah chapter 34. But all of that is, the 34 in itself is because of Amos and the 3 and 4 signifying the tipping point beyond the tolerable limit, which requires judgment and destruction, as in the flood, which incidentally is why the flood began the date 217, the 17th day of the 2nd month, because 2 times 17 equals 34, and that's what's hinted at with the 3 and the 4 here. It just, you see how the Bible just keeps circling in on itself? It's just infinite in how it's interconnected. And it interconnects with God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. Simon's biggest hit is bridge over troubled water. In God's signs, a bridge is the same metaphor as a door. It is symbolic of the spiritual realms connecting with the earthly realm. The word door is equal to 52 in simple English gematria. The 52nd prime number is 239. Simon is predicted to die 2,390 days after his prophetic dream on January 15th, 2019, in which an angelic voice instructed him to produce his Seven Psalms album and instructed him to name it Seven Psalms. By the way, he wrote a note after the dream, and he has it framed now. And when people come to his studio to interview him about his new album, he shows off the framed piece of paper that he wrote on after he had the dream. So we know the date of the dream because it's dated on the piece of paper. Okay? And it's very prophetic, obviously. This is a dream from God. It was January 19th, 2019. Exactly 390 days before Simon's predicted death. But Simon is symbolic of a bridge and a door, and the word door is equal to 52, and 239 is the 52nd prime number. But also, God pairs in his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections to confirm the signs and connections, the numbers 23, 9, and 44. And I know this because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. And the way in which God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works is it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And if we think about it, one simple way in which he would provide second witnesses for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9, 23, and 44. The basketball president wore 23 in high school and was inaugurated as the 44th president in 2009, 9, 23, and 44. Also, the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in Ezekiel chapter 9, and the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. That's why they are marked, because their chromosomes have been altered with an additional something, which is snake venom. That's another story though, but that's what is in the thing, okay? And that's a fact, and believe me, I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. It is to prove the controversial things that I am saying in these videos. In other words, when the prediction comes to pass, case closed, end of debate, no more discussion. It is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form, does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional form of false religious worship or technology. In fact, for those who are wise, it did come with a form of false religious worship, and it does not require a supposed new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, this is the Nicolaitan doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works of the product of this doctrine. And that's why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist. It's judgment for this doctrine. Now, and the prediction will prove this. That's the purpose of this prediction. I don't want to repeat myself. I know the reason for the prediction. I'm the one that's relaying the prediction. I know the reason for it. It is to prove what I just said. That is the reason. It isn't simply for you to go, cool, you knew something ahead of time and God was showing you something. No, it is to prove these things that God has overwhelmingly proved in his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, and this big picture of signs, patterns, and connections will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. Anyway, we have the 9 and 23 in this number, obviously, which is another reason why it's prophetic. Also, 52 is 2 times 26, and H226 in the Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word for prophetic sign, which means, in other words, this number of days connection confirms this is a prophetic sign. What are we talking about? This dream. It proves that this dream is a prophetic sign. When the prediction comes to pass that Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2,390 days after this dream, it will prove that this dream is a prophetic sign from God. Okay. The theme of the album, which was instructed to Simon to make and name it Seven Psalms, The theme of the album, which, by the way, is an interesting piece of music, I recommend listening to it, is crossing over a bridge into the afterlife, the spiritual realm. And again, Simon's bridge over troubled water is symbolic of a bridge connecting the spiritual realms. And specifically in Revelation 9, the demonic realm to the earthly realm, the bridge and the door that's opened with a key. And I explained earlier in the first paragraph how Simon is symbolic of a door and a key and a bridge. Well, anyway, 7 Psalms is about this. 7 Psalms is about crossing over into the afterlife as in a bridge to the spiritual realm. So this is amazing, right? Because I've been explaining how Paul Simon's death on 8/1, August 1st, will point to Revelation 8:1 and the sound of silence that was observed in heaven because of his song Sound of Silence. And that's followed with the 7 trumpets, and that's followed with the opening of the bottomless pit to the demonic realm through which the demons cross over a bridge into the earthly realm. Well, that's encapsulated with the 7 Psalms, because that's the theme of the album, crossing over the bridge into the afterlife. Paul Simon obviously made this album at this time of his life because he's 83. Well, he made the album, he had the dream 6 years ago, so that would mean that he was 77 at the time. But you get my point, is that he's at the stage of life where he's about to cross over the bridge. And now he will cross over the bridge, at least it's predicted that he will, on August 1st, 2025. The 44th president is the Antichrist, who will return to power in the White House. In Bible prophecy, the Antichrist's number is 666. The White House has 132 rooms. 132 is equal to 44 plus 44 plus 44. And God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And that's because the White House was all along designed to be the dwelling of the Antichrist, the 44th president. Paul Simon is predicted to die during his current concert tour, which began on the date 4/4 in New Orleans. 4/4, the date, was 13 weeks and 2 days, which hints at 132 and the number of rooms in the mansion, the White House, after the terrorist attack in New Orleans. Okay, so Paul Simon's tour that he's currently on began on the date 4/4, and as I've been explaining already in the other paragraphs, right, the other videos, if you're watching this in a separate video, Paul Simon is associated with the number 4, because the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door, and the bridge is also the same symbolism as a door, and Paul Simon's biggest hit was Bridge Over Troubled Water. In a nutshell, that's why Simon's associated with 4. His current tour began on the date 4/4 in New Orleans. The White House mansion, which he sang in, by the way, on the first day of the 4th month in 2024, it has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms. Okay, so that's confirmation of the 13 weeks and 2 days. And that's relevant too because Paul Simon sang in the 132-room mansion recently. Incidentally, exactly 4 times 4 months before Simon's predicted death, as I explained in the last paragraph. Well, now we're talking about this New Orleans terrorist attack on January 1st, right? The New Year's morning New Orleans attack, if you recall. And now I've tied it to Paul Simon. And anyway, the Antichrist number is 666. Louisiana is the 6 plus 6 plus 6th state to join the Union. And now, as I've shown, connects with the date 4/4 because the 44th president is the Antichrist. Now, the name Barak is equal to 6 times 6 times 6 in English gematria. Barak was born on the 6 times 6 times 6th day of the calendar year, and the word Barak in Hebrew means lightning. The Muslim terrorist drove his forward, as in lightning truck into the crowd in the 6 plus 6 plus 6th state to join the Union and killed 7 plus 7 people. This was on the same day that a terrorist blew up a Tesla, which is symbolic of lightning, because Nikola Tesla was known for his lightning experiments, for example, and of course electricity is symbolic of lightning, at the Trump Hotel, which makes it prophetic because of trumpets, 7 trumpets, right, in the 6 times 6th state. And that attack on the same day injured 7 people. The 7 plus 7 deaths and 7 injured on the date 1-1 is exactly 7 months before it is predicted that Paul Simon will die on 8-1. And again, Paul Simon is known for his song involving trumpets. There are 7 trumpets that follow Revelation 8-1. And of course, his recent album is 7 Psalms. So that's another reason for the 7 months. Now I'm really establishing the connection between the New Orleans attack and Paul Simon. Furthermore, 7 is the 4th prime number. And again, Paul Simon is associated with the number 4. Simon's tour began in New Orleans, where the attack killed 7 plus 7 people, 7 months before Simon's predicted death. Okay, and his 7 is the 4th prime number, and Simon began his tour in New Orleans on the date 4-4. Again, 4 equals door, equals bridge, equals Paul Simon. In Revelation 9:11, the door, as in the number 4, to the bottomless pit will be opened with a key, as in music keys that Paul Simon uses to compose his music. Okay? And Simon's concert tour began in New Orleans 119 days before his predicted death, when that hints at Revelation 9:11. It's amazing. His tour began on 4-4, which hints at the door opening to the bottomless pit in Revelation 9:11, and that day, 4-4, the beginning of the tour, is 119 days before his predicted death. Simon's first album, okay, and this is where it all comes together. This is the big climax. Okay, this is the big moment here. Simon's first album was Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. That's the name of the album. Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. The terrorist attack in New Orleans began just after 3 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. There's more to this. Okay, this is the paragraph that I just read. It occurred to me that I was missing some important things here. The sound of silence in heaven in Revelation 8:1, which is why Simon will die on 8:1, because of his song Sound of Silence. Revelation 8:1 is followed by the sound of thunder and lightning, which is followed by the 7 trumpets of God's judgment and destruction. Following 7 plus 7 people killed by a Ford lightning truck, that's the name of the truck, Paul Simon is predicted to die on 8:1. Again, Revelation 8:1 and the sound of silence is followed by lightning and 7 trumpets, and 7 plus 7 people killed by a lightning truck is followed by exactly 7 months to Simon's death. Okay? See what I'm saying there? Now, also, the number 7 is the 4th prime number, but also it was a Ford lightning truck. as in 4. And again, on the same night, 7 plus 7 people were killed by a lightning truck, which was Ford. On the day that 7 were injured by the Tesla, which is also lightning. 4 iconic locations in the US were struck by lightning. Amazing. The Empire State Building, the One World Tower, as well as the Capitol Building in New York City, as well as the Capitol Building and Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. 4 iconic locations. And again, it was an attack by the Ford lightning truck. And again, it connected to the New Orleans concert date on the date 4/4, as I explained earlier, which began Simon's recent tour. Okay, and the 2 cities with the 4 iconic locations that were struck by lightning, and this, by the way, was a news story, and the story spoke about the coincidence of 4 of the nation's iconic monuments, structures being struck on the first day of the year. Okay, and these 2 cities, New York and Washington, are the 2 cities that planes struck iconic buildings on 9/11. And by the way, it was 2 lightning strikes in New York City, and it was 2 planes in New York City, and it was 2 planes that were supposed to strike Washington, D.C. And again, 9/11 in 2001 hints at Revelation 9/11, when the door or the bridge will be opened to the bottomless pit, as in bridge over troubled water. Okay, so the 4 locations struck by lightning and rainstorms hints at bridge over troubled water. Because bridge is symbolic of door, which is equal to 4. Symbolic of 4. That's why 4 locations. In other words, it's hinting at Revelation 9/11 because it's the door to the bottomless pit. Or the bridge, same symbolism. And again, the 2 iconic locations in each of these 2 cities clearly hints at 9/11 and the striking of the 2 planes in each city. Well, one of them didn't hit. By the way, the one that didn't hit Washington, D.C. that was supposed to killed 44 people. And what did it do? It opened a pit in Pennsylvania, which, by the way, was located or is located 40 plus 40 miles from Pittsburgh, also known as the City of Bridges. The reason for the pit that was procured by the plane crash, that is 40 acres big, is because the plane crashed at a 40-degree angle when it killed 44 people. One of the 4 planes on 9/11, which hints at the door, because door equals 4 in Revelation 9/11. The door to the bottomless pit, which is why one of the planes crashed 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, the city of bridges, as in the door. You see what I'm saying? I'm repeating myself now. It's astounding beyond words. And again, 7 is the 4th prime number. 7 plus 7 killed, 7 injured. Exactly 7 months before Simon's predicted death, which will hint at Revelation 8:1, which is preceded by lightning, and then 7 trumpets, and then the opening to the bottomless pit with a door. 57 people were injured in the attack with the Ford lightning truck in New Orleans. The prophetic Kerr County flooding in Texas on July 4th, 2025 that pointed to Paul Simon and bridge over troubled water, as I explained in another video, is 57 days before it is predicted that a dirty bomb will be detonated in New York City on Saturday night on August 30th. Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, which hints at the date August 30th, 8:30. And he is known for performing on Saturday Night Live in New York City in general, but especially right after 9/11. But he met his wife, for example, on the set. That's at the Saturday Night Live studio when she performed on Saturday Night Live. I mean, Paul Simon is associated with Saturday Night Live in general. He's friends with the other former Saturday Night Live hosts like Chevy Chase and Steve Martin, etc. Okay, he's from that era of the 70s Saturday Night Live crew, right? But anyway, so Paul Simon's associated with Saturday Night, in other words, in New York City. And on Saturday night, on August 30th, 8:30, it's predicted that dirty bombs will be detonated in New York City. And Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83. And the dirty bomb is predicted to explode 57 days after the Kerr County flooding near where Paul Simon lives. And I explained in another video how it does point to Paul Simon and bridge over troubled water. But the 57 days is relevant because, as I've explained now, the New Orleans attack was about Paul Simon or related to Paul Simon, and it was 57 people that were injured in the attack. The beginning of the flood judgment is described in Genesis 7:11. The lightning strikes and attack with the Ford lightning truck. On the day of the 4 lightning strikes of the 4 iconic monuments. On the date 1/1, in which 7 plus 7 people were killed, is followed by 7 months exactly to Simon's predicted death on 8/1, which will be a warning of judgment that points to Revelation 8:1. Revelation 8:1 is in itself the warning of the judgment that follows Revelation 8:1, the 7 trumpets. Therefore, the date 1/1 and 7 plus 7 deaths followed by 7 months hints at a 7 and 11 to hint at Genesis 7:11 and the flood judgment. And this is also relevant because this is in context again of the lightning strikes in the rainstorms on this night that was a prophetic sign, like I explained. The lightning that struck the 4 iconic locations in the 2 cities. And so that in itself is biblical flood symbolism, which is more confirmation of this 11 and 7 that's hinted at here. And again, it's Genesis 7:11 that the beginning of the judgment is described. And so again, Paul Simon's predicted death will be a prophetic sign pointing to the beginning of judgment and destruction. Paul Simon is symbolism for the bridge that demons will cross over that is symbolized in Revelation 9:11. Simon is predicted to die 11 months and 19 days, which hints at Revelation 9:11, after the death of Wally Amos of Famous Amos Cookies at the age of 88. In the Bible, there is a famous prophet named Amos. And Amos chapter 8 speaks of a basket of summer fruit. Paul Simon is predicted to die in the middle of summer. It was Wally Amos who first signed Simon and Garfunkel. Yes, the guy, Famous Amos Cookies guy, before he was Famous Amos Cookies, he worked for the agency that signed Simon and Garfunkel. He was the guy. And Amos lured them in with a gift of cookies. That's how he got started in cookies. Because he would lure in artists and make contracts by giving them cookies to make him stand out from the others that were competing for them. Really, really brilliant strategy too. Because who doesn't love cookies? But so that's why the death of this Wally Amos, which hints at the prophet in the Bible, connects to the death of Paul Simon, because Wally Amos, signed Simon and Garfunkel. And that's why he died at the age of 88, because it points to chapter 8 of the book of Amos, which begins with a basket of summer fruit. And by the way, the beginning of this chapter about a basket of summer fruit is also, in a way, alluding to the beginning of Revelation 8:1 in the New Testament with the sound of silence. I didn't think of that until just now. No kidding. No kidding. God used this death of Amos, famous Amos, at the age of 88 to point to this basket of summer fruit. But Amos signed Paul Simon, and that's why Paul Simon connects his predicted death connects with the death of Amos. And 8:1, August 1st, is the timing of the middle of the summer for a basket of summer fruit. Wow. Okay, now, Simon is also known for being from New York City and performing on Saturday Night Live in New York City after 9/11. He also performed at the 10th anniversary tribute at the 9/11 memorial. This is also why his death will be 11 months and 19 days after the death of famous Amos at the age of 88. Well, first of all, famous Amos signed Simon and Garfunkel in New York City, but in the events of 9/11 is the story of the heroes of the 88th floor. The Tribute in Lights art installation that commemorated the Twin Towers was made up of 88 searchlights. And through the 9/11 events, which I explained in many other videos, God pointed to George Washington, and according to Wikipedia, there are 88 places in America named Washington. Simon will die on the date 8/1 because his death will point to the first verse of the 8th chapter of Revelation. 8/1, again, because Simon's big first hit was Sound of Silence, and in Revelation 8:1, the period of silence is observed in heaven. 8/1 is the middle of summer. Wally Amos, famous Amos Cookies, who was the first to sign Simon and Garfunkel. I just realized this is a double entendre here. God is playing on this. The signing of Paul Simon and Garfunkel is a prophetic sign. So it's a literal signing. It's a literal sign. So Wally Amos was the first to sign Simon and Garfunkel to a record label, and he died at the age of 88 because his death pointed to the first verse of the 8th chapter of Amos. Okay, so again, Simon will die on the date 8/1 because it'll point to the first verse of Revelation chapter 8. Wally Amos, who signed Paul Simon and Garfunkel, died at the age of 88 because it points to the first verse of the 8th chapter of Amos, which regards a basket of summer fruit. And the date that Paul Simon will die is in the middle of summer, when there are baskets of summer fruit. Simon will die on 8:1 because the verse of the 8th chapter of Revelation regards a period because of Revelation 8:1. So let me repeat that. Simon will die on 8:1 because the first verse of the 8th chapter of Revelation regards a period of silence that was observed in heaven, Paul Simon's song, Sound of Silence. The singer-songwriter, Paul Simon, will die at the age of 83 because it will point to Amos 8:3. So they're cross-referencing each other here, right? Paul Simon will die on 8:1 because of the first verse in Revelation 8:1. Wally Amos died at 88 because of the first verse in Amos 1. That's a basket of summer fruit that points to Paul Simon. And Wally Amos signed Paul Simon. But the age at which Paul Simon will die points back to the book of Amos, which is Amos 8:3, because Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, and this will point to Amos 8:3. So through all this roundabout, God is pointing to Amos 8:3. This is getting really, really deep, by the way. This is getting so spiritually deep now. This is like one of the highlights of this entire endeavor of 7 years now of watching God's signs. I cannot describe it in words, how amazing what I'm about to explain is. But I'm getting there here. You can see through all these connections here, the back and forth, we've got God pointing to Amos 8:3, which is this, the songs, which is why Paul Simon, who was signed by Wally Amos, as in Amos 8:3, the songs of the temple shall become wailings in that day, declares the Lord God. So many dead bodies, exclamation mark. And this is in quotes. It's God speaking. They are thrown everywhere, exclamation mark. Silence, exclamation mark. Wow. This is Paul Simon here. The singer-songwriter, the sound of silence, Amos 8:3. Paul Simon will die at 83. Simon was signed by Amos, as in Amos 8:3. He'll die on 8:1, as in Sound of Silence, Revelation 8:1. Okay? I mean, what can I say here? God is seriously communicating something here. The death of Paul Simon is a massive, massive warning of the coming many dead bodies and the judgment that's coming in the 7 trumpets that follow Revelation 8:1, which is about the sound of silence. The last verses of Sound of Silence. Now, so after discovering that, it occurred to me to look at the lyrics of Sound of Silence again. And it gets even deeper. The song Sound of Silence is a prophecy. It's like the book of Amos, if you will. God has used this Sound of Silence song to tie into this prophetic story that I'm telling. The last verses of Sound of Silence. And the sign said, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, and whispered in the sounds of silence. So this use of prophets and writing, this is more confirmation that all of this is for the purpose of pointing to Amos 8:3. And this warning that God is giving to ancient Israel, the only other of the two nations in history, besides America, that were founded on a relationship with God and the Bible, with the Pilgrims. Paul Simon equals America. He has a big hit named America. He is the quintessential baby boomer American singer and songwriter. So God has used Paul Simon as a prophet. Now, incidentally, Paul Simon has said in interviews that there are a few of his songs that he didn't actually write. And as he puts it, to paraphrase, because I forget his exact words, but he is or was somewhat of a conduit, and the songs just flowed through him. In other words, what he is saying is he's not really taking credit for the songs. A strange thing to say. But given what we are talking about here, it makes a lot of sense. There's more to this, by the way, because the subway halls is a reference to New York City, and it is predicted that in this same month that Paul Simon will die will be the disaster in the subway stations in New York City, which I'll explain in a second. But this is just amazing. Again, we have the sound of silence, and again, Revelation 8:1, the sound of silence. Prophets, Amos. Wally Amos died at 88, who signed Paul Simon to point to the book of Amos, the first verse, the basket of summer fruit. Paul Simon will die in the middle of summer on the date 8:1, and he'll die at 83, which is relevant just like the age at which Wally Amos died is relevant. In 83, hints at Amos 8:3, which speaks of songs and silence, which is echoed in Paul Simon's song, Sound of Silence, when the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls because of what is coming and whispered in the sound of silence. More lyrics here from the Sound of Silence. It occurred to me there's even more. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. Now I forgot to put this in bold and italics because this is amazing. This 10,000 people, maybe more, is a reference to so many dead bodies in Amos 8:3. So many dead bodies. They are thrown everywhere. 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. This seems to me to be a reference to perhaps people in the afterlife, in hell, when they'll be talking and speaking and hearing and listening, but no one's understanding each other after they've died. So many dead bodies thrown everywhere. 10,000 people, maybe more. People writing songs, as in Paul Simon, as in songs in Amos 8:3. The songs shall become wailing in that day. In that day when many people die, 10,000 people or maybe more, and they're not hearing or speaking with each other, people are writing songs that voices never share. No one dared. It could be also a reference to the people that are still remaining alive after these events of the seven trumpets, or during that time, because they know this is judgment from God, or at least they unconsciously or intuitively suspect. It's. I don't want to get off onto a tangent here, but everyone knows there's a God. It's a lie that people, when they say that there's no God, atheists are lying to themselves. They know there's a God, and that'll come out when they die. And they'll also confide, if you really get to speak with them, they will confide that they don't really believe that there's no God. But anyway, no one dared disturb the sound of silence. You could imagine that people are so in shock with what's going to happen that's described in the seven trumpets that they wouldn't even dare to speak out. Or they'd just be in shock. Okay, yeah, here I've referenced it again here. The songs, okay? So many dead bodies, they are thrown everywhere. That's 10,000 people, maybe more. Silence. Sound of silence. Which is again why Paul Simon will die on 8:1, because of Revelation 8:1 and the observed silence in heaven. That is a parallel with the silence in the book of Amos, chapter 8. And therefore, Paul Simon's death will be a massive, massive warning of the trumpet judgments in Revelation chapter 8 that are now set to begin. Because the trumpet judgments follow the sound of silence. The fulfillment of these seven trumpets will follow the death of the composer of Sound of Silence. So there's more. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. This is completely biblical, by the way. Because the judgments are coming because of people's worship of false gods. And people today don't make idols out of wood and then worship them like they did back in biblical times. It's a metaphor. People today worship all kinds of false gods. Whether it be their careers, money, success, their fashion, anything that puts anything ahead of God is a false god. As God says in the beginning, in the Ten Commandments, he is a jealous God. And so the thing that God hates most is, well, false religion, false worship, religious worship. But today people worship all kinds of things, including, by the way, themselves. And that's even encoded into a particular religion, which is Eastern religion, which is deception from Satan, in which people claim that God is the universe itself and they are God, and they just need to remember that they are God and become enlightened through supposed spiritual evolution, through spiritual practices such as yoga and meditation, etc. I mean, that's really become, in a way, the dominant religion in the West and has replaced Christianity, because most people aren't atheists. Most people actually in the West have a worldview in which pretty much is what I just described. God being an impersonal energy instead of a personal being who is holy, which is the Hebrew word that means separate from the creation. He isn't the creation itself. The idea that God is the creation itself is called pantheism, and the idea that God is separate from the creation and created the creation is called monotheism, and both can't be true. The world is either round or flat. It can't be both. The foundation of philosophy of logic 101 is A can't equal not A. So the people that are pantheists, they don't really think clearly, which is why they are pantheists in the first place. They don't think, but they will say something like, well, all religions fit into my religion or my worldview. That's the arrogance of the Hindu Eastern worldview, is supposedly all of the world's religions fit under its umbrella. And they will even have the nerve to tell someone who's a Christian that they're a Christian because they have their false idea of who Christ is and on and on. It has nothing to do with the Bible, but they have their own ideas and they think it's, whatever. I'm going off onto a tangent here, but it's necessary to say because there are so many people that are caught up in that worldview, that lie, including many people that call themselves quote unquote Christians. There's actually a new religion today that's been spawned in the last few years, which is made up of mostly baby boomers, women who have combined New Age, Hindu, Eastern religion ideas with Christianity. It's like this mix. They're like half Christian, half Hindu. But it's still deception. They're still on their way to hell. They're not Christian. They never, for example, read the Bible, or rarely, but if they do, they reinterpret it from its clear meaning. Anyway, enough of that. So, and the people bowed and prayed to the neon gods they made, and the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming. And the sign said, "The words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, and whispered in the sounds of silence." So I wanted to add this part here because we are talking about a sign and it flashing out a warning. This is the lyrics of Sound of Silence, which is what I'm saying is that God is using this song and Paul Simon as a prophetic sign to flash out a warning. And this warning is being given to the world through this video. Do you appreciate that? If you are a Christian, please know it is your responsibility to never stop sharing this video. And if you do, share another video on this channel, if that's the case. But to never stop sharing this channel. And I literally mean that. You need to work. You need to use your bags of gold. And the one servant, and Jesus is speaking to Christians in Matthew 25, that did nothing with their bag of gold was banished to hell. Once saved, always saved is not true. Read the words to the prophet Ezekiel in chapter 3 and 33, and to what happens to the watchmen or the prophets that do nothing with the warning. The warning is being given out through this video and this prediction. You need to share it, and don't only share it into the comments sections of channels you always frequently visit and preach to the choir. Go to places you never go. Go to the sites of the enemy. This is a prophetic sign. The Sound of Silence is a sign. It contains the word sign and flashing out a warning. The death of Paul Simon will be a warning, and this will be proven to be true because of this prediction. This is the purpose of this prediction that is from God, that is only being explained in this channel, because God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. So please share this video. The sign metaphor in Simon's Sound of Silence lyrics hints at a prophetic sign. His death will be a prophetic sign, as will be the dirty bomb explosions that are predicted to occur within the Penn Station and Grand Central Station subway walls. As in, the words of the prophets were written on the subway walls, which is predicted to occur later in the month, the same month that Paul Simon is predicted to die, August 30th, which, by the way, is why Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age 83. It hints at the date 8:30. If the dirty bombs don't explode on 8:30, it will be September 4th. Afterward, after the dirty bomb explosions in the subway walls, or between the subway walls, there will be an evacuation and a sound of silence in New York City. Picture that. People have evacuated because of the fallout of the dirty material, the radioactive material and the dirty bombs. There will actually be a sound of silence in the normally very busy Penn Station and Grand Central stations. Wow. These signs will be a warning of the upcoming loss of life described by the prophet Amos in chapter 8. That will be the result of the events that are described in Revelation chapter 8. Amos is describing the massive death in chapter 8, and that will be the result of the events described in Revelation chapter 8. Which is why Wally Amos died at the age of 88. These two chapter 8s are connected to each other. And the dirty bombs will not incur a massive loss of life. They will be a warning, a further warning of the upcoming events of Revelation chapter 8. Which is why I believe there will either be a prophetic sign on the day 8:30 or the sign will be the dirty bombs. Because it will point to Amos 8:3. And the so many dead bodies thrown everywhere. A third of the world's population is predicted to die in the upcoming 6 years, according to Bible prophecy. Well, 6.25 years, 6 years. The Lord's return is on the Day of Atonement in 2031. Paul Simon is predicted to die exactly 115 weeks after the release of the album Seven Psalms on May 19th, 2023, which was 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days after Simon had his prophetic dream, in which he says he was instructed to produce the album and name it Seven Psalms. The date of his dream was January 15th, 2019. We know this because he talks about this dream in the interviews that he gives. And if they are at his studio in Texas when they have the interview, he shows them the framed piece of paper on the wall on which he wrote after his dream, which is dated January 15th. This is one of the most amazing things I have ever learned through the revelations in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. This 115 weeks hints at the date 115. Because again, I'll just repeat that. If you could picture it in your mind without a diagram. Paul Simon is predicted to die 115 weeks exactly after the release of the album. Paul Simon is equal to the number 4 in God's signs. The album was released 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days after the dream that instructed to make the album, and the dream was on the date 115, which hints at 115, or rather the other way around. 115 hints at the date 115. And this is because it points to Amos chapter 1, which has 15 verses. What's with Amos chapter 1? The phrase, quote, for 3 transgressions and for 4, unquote. I should say for 4, which is this number that God has been using so much regarding the signs with Paul Simon. This phrase, for 3 transgressions and for 4, is repeated in this first chapter of Amos. Only now has it become known the full reason why God uses the number 4 with Paul Simon. It isn't only for the door symbolism and the bridge symbolism, like I've explained. It's for this reason here. Because Paul Simon is a massive, massive warning of judgment through his signs, through his songs, I should say. I mean, it's amazing how all of these signs flow together in a big picture that parallels Bible prophecy. Okay, and ultimately we are pointing to the warning of judgment in Amos, in the book of Amos. Like I have explained already in chapter 8. But this book of Amos begins with the first chapter, and we have this symbolism that's being pointed to. And what is this? What does this phrase mean? Okay. Its meaning is that it is a Hebrew idiom signifying a fullness or completeness of sin, reaching a point where God's judgment is inevitable. It's not simply listing 4 transgressions, but rather using 4 to emphasize that the sins have gone beyond a tolerable limit, reaching a tipping point. This is the most stunning revelation. So the number 3 often represents completeness or a set standard in Hebrew thought. So that's why, and for 4, adding 4 to the 3 transgressions. So the chapter is there's for 3 transgressions and for 4 of Gaza, for 3 transgressions of Tyre, and for 4, for 3 transgressions of the Amorites, and for 4, or something, right? So we have the completeness of the sin with the 3 transgressions, and the 4 is just an idiom that is meaning that it's gone beyond the tolerable limit of the completeness of sin, and therefore requires a judgment. Okay? It's intolerable. It's reached a tipping point. So adding 4 signifies that the sins have exceeded the set standard, reaching a point where God's patience is exhausted. This is the case with America. Paul Simon's big hit, America, is symbolism for this purpose. God is exhausted and has run out of patience. The completeness of sin is in, it's now exceeded. Judgment and destruction must now come. This phrase is a literary device used by Amos to highlight the accumulated nature of sin and the certainty of divine judgment. Okay, it's the accumulated sin, completeness of it, and the certainty of the impending divine judgment. That's what the death of Paul Simon will signify. It is so profound. Paul Simon will signify it's done. The sins have exceeded the tolerable limit. The judgment destruction is now certain. Simon's death will make that clear. The 7 trumpets will now commence. Not just for 4. It's not that God is listing 4 specific sins, but rather the cumulative effect of their transgressions has now reached a point where judgment is unavoidable. Simon's death will be a prophetic sign that signifies the cumulative effect of the transgressions of America has reached a point where judgment is unavoidable. This is what Paul Simon's death will signify. It is a massive prophetic sign. Paul Simon is a massive prophetic sign, and that's all Paul Simon as a prophetic sign comes together and is completed with his prophetic death, which is predicted to be on August 1st. And when this prediction comes to pass, it will prove the matter. And this prediction is only being explained on this channel. And so if you are a Christian, please be advised the words that God had for Ezekiel, the watchman, and for those who do nothing with the warning. When Jesus spoke to the servants in Matthew 25, he was speaking to Christians. And the one servant that did nothing with his bag of gold was banished to hell. Once saved, always saved isn't true. And you need to do work. A lot of evangelicals have a phobia regarding this because they believe if you think that you need to do work, you are supposedly not saved, which is wicked deception from Satan. Anyway, that's another subject. I won't get into doctrine here. But this is a massive bag of gold. This prophetic sign that is Paul Simon is only being explained on this channel. In other words, never ever stop sharing either this video or another video from this channel. And don't only share it in places you always go, in the comments sections, but comment in places you never go, the sites of the enemy. And change up the comment every time so the algorithm, the filters don't ban you from YouTube, okay? Because if you use the same phrase over and over and just copy paste, it's going to be like you're doing a SPAM. So just change your comment up slightly every time. But and to make that really simple, I would just have the simplest of, I don't know what to, put some extra letters. Put some gobbledygook in the comment to make it not the same every time. Okay, so, I'm doing my part here, getting you the video. It's your job to spread the news of this video far and wide. And if you would like the file that I hand out that has the information that people need right now, please email me. Now is not the time to be watching, a video on YouTube when you could be using that half an hour even to help potentially hundreds of people through handing out the flyer on a busy street corner or on car windshields in busy parking lots or in mailboxes. And you need to work. Luke chapter 21. Pray always that one is worthy of escaping the things that are coming. And don't believe the Calvinist translations. Go to the King James. It's those who are worthy of escaping. Not all quote-unquote Christians are going to be raptured. That's a lie. Anyway, time to end this video here. Sorry to get off the subject of this most important one of the most amazing revelations that have come through his signs. And by the way, it's now really certain that Paul Simon will die 115 weeks after the album was released. The album, again, is also, the theme of it is passing over into the afterlife. Okay? And again, as I explained in the other part of this email thread, the album was released. It connects with the release of the song Homeward Bound. Paul Simon will be homeward bound. And anyway, it all points to this, through the date of the dream as well, this Amos chapter 1, which has 15 verses, and that's for the purpose of using this idiom in Hebrew, which involves the number 4, to signify that the transgression's limit has been reached, and the sins have gone beyond the limit, and judgment is now unavoidable. That's the reason for the 4 related to the Paul Simon signs. Wow, I don't know what to say. Wow. Simon is predicted to die on the date 8-1 because this will hint at the sound of silence in heaven in Revelation 8:1. 8:1 will be 10 months and 8 days, as in the date 8:1 in Revelation 8:1, after Simon performed a surprise concert in New York City on September 24th, 2024. This 10 months and 8 days is also 44 weeks and 4 days. And again, Paul Simon is symbolic of bridge, which is symbolic of door, which is equal to 4, as I've explained in other videos. The 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. And Paul Simon is predicted to die on the first day of the 4 plus 4th month, if you will. And I've explained all of this in many other, the prior paragraphs, which if you're watching this in a separate video, watch all of the videos. But so this is amazing because this 10 months and 8 days, which hints at the date 8-1 in Revelation 8-1, which is why Paul Simon will die on the date 8-1 because of the sound of silence in heaven in Revelation 8-1. Okay, but 8-1 this year, the predicted date of Simon's death will be 10 months and 8 days after his concert in New York City. Paul Simon is associated with New York City because of 9/11. He performed in New York City on Saturday Night Live right after 9/11, also at the 10th anniversary at the 9/11 memorial. And amazingly, this 10 months and 8 days is also 44 weeks and 4 days. And the big thing about what I'm explaining here in these videos is that Paul Simon is symbolic of the number 4 through bridge and door symbolism. And speaking of 9/11, it was 4 airplanes. And the 4th of the 4 airplanes to crash killed 44 people in a 40-acre pit that was created by the crash because the plane crashed at a 40-degree angle, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, the city of bridges, as in the bottomless pit that is opened through which the demons will cross a bridge to the earthly realm, which is what is described following the 7 trumpets, which follows the sound of silence heard in heaven in Revelation 8:1. Paul Simon is equal to bridge. Paul Simon is symbolism. In God's signs, Paul Simon is symbolism for the bridge over troubled water, his biggest hit, which gives us bridge symbolism, which is the metaphor implied in the 5th trumpet judgment in Revelation chapter 9. Again, this 5th trumpet judgment that follows the silence of sound of silence in heaven in Revelation 8:1, which is why Paul Simon will die on the date 8:1. Okay, we have the 7 trumpets that follow that, and the 5th of the 7 trumpets is the bottomless pit being opened with a key, which implies a door, and a door in God's signs is the same symbolism as a bridge. The demons will cross over the bridge, go through the door from the demonic realm into the earthly realm. That's the 5th trumpet. So Paul Simon is also mansion symbolism. In fact, God has used the sale of Paul Simon's mansion in the 5th state as an important prophetic sign involving Paul Simon's signs. That's another story which I'll discuss in another video and have discussed already in other videos. So, but back to this paragraph, Paul Simon's daughter. Well, actually, this paragraph is about Paul Simon's mansion. Okay, so he has more than one mansion. I'm speaking of the one in Connecticut, in New Canaan, Connecticut, which is also prophetic. New Canaan is Israel, and Paul Simon is Jewish. Anyway, Paul Simon's daughter was in the news on July 8th, 2025. All right, and this was 4 days after the Kerr County flooding in Texas that pointed to Simon's mansion in nearby Wimberley, Texas, which I'll explain in another video. But the bottom line is that that's a typo, the Kerr County flooding, in other words, the Texas flooding, if you don't know, it was the Kerr County flooding, also known as the Mystic Camp flooding. This tragedy is a Paul Simon sign. It's bridge over troubled water. Paul Simon is married to his wife, Edie Brickell, who is from Texas, which is why they now reside in Wimberley, Texas. And her one big hit was What I Am, which is clearly a hint at the Bible and God giving his name to Moses as I am, and Jesus using that and playing on that to reveal that he is God. Well, the song, the lyric is, part of the chorus of the song is, choke me in the shallow water before I go too deep or get too deep. Okay, choke me in the shallow water is this lyric that she repeats over and over in the song. Well, that's a river flood. That's a flash flood, river flood, right? That's amazing given what I'm saying, which is that their residence in Wimberley, Texas currently is the reason for this Kerr County flooding, where, of course, people, including children, were choked in the shallow water by the rushing water, okay? Now, all right. Now, so July 8th, Paul Simon's daughter was in the news, and that was 4 days after the flooding, which, by the way, was on the 4th day of the month, the 4th day of the 7th month, July 4th, and the number 7 is the 4th prime number. And again, 4 is symbolic of Paul Simon because of the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet being the symbol for a door, and Paul Simon is symbolic of a door because of the door being the same symbol as a bridge over troubled water, which is why 4 days after the troubled water, we have Paul Simon's daughter in the news. Okay, so what's going on here? So July 8th, 2025 was exactly 5 months. Okay, so it looks like I explain it in another video, the Paul Simon's daughter prophetic sign, but I'm using this where God is using this date of the Paul Simon's daughter sign, which was or is about the mansion in Connecticut. God is playing on that to point to another of Paul Simon's mansions, because the day of the Paul Simon's daughter, Paul Simon's mansion sign, and basically the daughter was in the news for posting on social media her distress over Richard Gere's sale of her father's mansion, her childhood home. But I'll explain more in another video, but that's the story. She's extremely upset that Richard Gere is selling the property to a company that plans to demolish the mansion. All right? And so, anyway, exactly 5 months prior to this Paul Simon mansion, Paul Simon daughter news story, a YouTuber posted a video about Paul Simon's abandoned $5 million mansion. Okay, so exactly 5 months, $5 million. What are we talking about? The fifth trumpet involving the bridge. By the way, the name Paul Simon is equal to 500 in Hebrew gematria, and Paul Simon is Jewish. And his only number one hit as a solo artist was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, which also hints at the number 5. Bridge Over Troubled Water was Simon and Garfunkel's fifth and last album. And again, it's because of this fifth trumpet and the bridge that the demons cross over. But we have, and also in that fifth trumpet, when or after the demons cross over, they demonically possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And these people will seek to die, but will not find death. And this will last for a period of 5 months, as it is said in this fifth trumpet prophecy. So we have this 5 months here in this connection with Paul Simon, between two Paul Simon mansion signs. All right, now, incidentally, another thing too is that Paul Simon sings of the Graceland mansion in his song Graceland. And the Graceland mansion sits on the fifth semi-prime number of acres. Semi-prime number is a number that is only divisible by two other prime numbers. It's 14 acres. That's 5, and that's relevant too because the White House mansion sits on 5 acres, and the Graceland mansion is used in God's signs to point to the White House mansion. And that's why, incidentally, the Graceland mansion is in the 4 times 4th state, and why the White House mansion has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, because the 44th president is the Antichrist who will reside in the White House mansion. Okay, now, the title of the video of this YouTuber I'm talking about mentions a secret door inside the mansion, which is the highlight of the video tour of the abandoned mansion. So what this YouTube video is this guy and his friends who I guess have a channel in which they visit abandoned properties and mansions and go inside them and tour them. In this case, he took a tour of this abandoned Paul Simon mansion in the 4 times 4th state. Incidentally, the same state as the Graceland mansion. I don't know. I don't recall where the mansion is. It may even be in the Memphis area. I don't know though. But anyway, the title of the video, like I'm saying, which is how I found it, because I did a Google search for Paul Simon and door. So I found this video because the title includes the mention of a secret door inside Paul Simon's former mansion. Okay, and which again was $5 million, and the video even says that, and the video was posted exactly 5 months before the other Paul Simon daughter mansion sign. Now, and the secret door inside the tour is the highlight of the tour of the abandoned mansion. The abandoned mansion has a secret door to a gun vault. In God's signs, guns and mass shootings are symbolic of the thing, the mass taking of the thing. Things that come out of guns and go into people are symbolic of things that come out of things and go into people. So the secret door goes to a gun vault. And the demons come through the door in the fifth trumpet, demonically possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And this demonic possession process includes 5G frequencies, and music is frequencies, another reason why Paul Simon is a musician. But the secret door goes to a gun vault, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which is the facilitator for the demonic possession. This is amazing. Now, the video was posted on the date 3/8, which is 8/3 outside of the US, and Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83. Door equals 4 again. The video about Paul Simon's abandoned mansion with a secret door was posted on the date 3/8, exactly 40.00% of a year before it is predicted that Paul Simon will die at the age of 83. Amazing. And if you're interested, this is the URL to this YouTube video I'm talking about, this tour of Paul Simon's former $5 million mansion, 5 months, posted 5 months before Paul Simon's daughter mansion news story. This mansion tour will show you the secret door to the gun vault. I mean, it's up to you if you want to watch that. You get the idea, though. There's nothing in the video that you need to see, though. The sale of Simon and Brickell, Edie Brickell, the singer from the early 90s, Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, okay? If you don't know, Paul Simon married her after he met her on the Saturday Night Live set. So the sale of Simon and Brickell's mansion in New Canaan, Connecticut was finalized on July 1st, 2022. The property has 8,811 square feet of living space, which hints at Revelation 8:1 and the date on which Simon is predicted to die on 8/1. The story of the sale of the mansion is how Simon and Brickell were forced to sell for significantly less than they bought the property for. Their mansion was sold to Richard Gere for $10.8 million. $10.8 million also hints at Revelation 8:1 and the date 8/1. So, I don't know why I added this paragraph into this email thread. It sounds like this should be added to the email thread involving the Paul Simon daughter news story related to the sale of the mansion. Regardless, though, I'll just include it here. But speaking of the fifth trumpet, this prophecy is symbolized in God's signs and in the passage by Revelation 9:11. Okay, God pointed to Revelation 9:11 through the events on 9/11 in 2001, for one thing. So Revelation 9:11 is symbolic of the fifth trumpet. And so is Simon because of the bridge symbolism. All right, and at one point, there was like one intermediate stage between the initial asking price, which was also prophetic, and then the final sale price. And that intermediate level was 11.9 million, which hints at Revelation 9:11. And again, the mansion was in the fifth state, which hints at the fifth trumpet. All right, see how it's all amazing. So, let's see. Yeah. And it was, by the way, sold to Richard Gere because he is symbolism for the movie Chicago. which God uses in his signs to point to the Antichrist, who is from Chicago. So anyway, I'll say more regarding this in other videos, though, this whole sign here. What I'm just saying right here is just pointing out the price and how it's relevant, which kind of is relevant to what I just explained about the other price of the other mansion, which was $5 million, all right? Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, "Jesus loves you," unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.